Hi everyone, welcome back to another study in the Gospel of John. Today we'll be diving into John 7. This chapter takes us to the Feast of Tabernacles, a backdrop which is rich in symbolism and meaning. It's a moment in Jesus' ministry where opposition against him intensifies, yet his words and his actions continue to reveal his identity and purpose. Let's start by setting the scene. Now, John 7 begins with tension. The Feast of the Tabernacles is one of the most elaborate Jewish festivals and is taking place in Jerusalem. This feast commemorates God's provision during Israel's wilderness journey and celebrates the crop harvest. Now, while the nation is rejoicing, the leaders are plotting against Jesus, and even his own brothers express skepticism about him being the Christ. And Jesus delays going to the feast openly and instead chooses to go in secret. Why does he do this, we might ask? Well, his timing is guided by the Father, not human expectations. In verse 6, Jesus says, "My time has not yet come." This is a reminder of his submission to the divine plan, a theme we see throughout John's Gospel. When Jesus does arrive, he begins teaching midway through the festival. His words astonish the crowds. They marvel at his understanding and say, "How does this man know letters, having never studied?" Now, Jesus responds by pointing to his divine authority when he says, "My doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me." Here, Jesus emphasizes a key principle that the origin of his teaching is not human, but divine. He invites anyone willing to do the will of God to recognize this. And this speaks to the spiritual discernment required to understand who he is. It's not about intellectual capability, but a heart aligned with God's will. A pivotal moment in this chapter comes in verses 37 and 38, where Jesus stands on the last day of the feast and declares, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." The Feast of the Tabernacles included a water pouring ceremony. This symbolized God's provision of rain and his promise of spiritual renewal. Jesus' words are a direct claim to fulfill this promise. He is the only source of living water, the only one who can satisfy the deepest needs of the human soul. But notice how the responses to Jesus vary. Some recognize him as the prophet or the Christ. Others reject him outright, clinging to their sort of preconceived ideas about the Messiah's origin and the number of signs the Messiah will perform. The division underscores a central theme of John's Gospel, that belief in Jesus is the dividing line between life and death. Now, as we look back on John 7, there are a few key takeaways. First, Jesus' timing teaches us patience and trust. How often do we want God to act according to our timeline? Yet Jesus shows us the beauty of surrendering to God's perfect plan. Second, his invitation to come and drink reminds us of our own need for him. Just as physical water sustains the body, his living water sustains our souls. Are we drawing near to him daily, allowing him to refresh and renew us through prayer and reading the Bible? Finally, the mixed responses to Jesus challenge us to examine our own hearts. Are there areas where we resist him, clinging to our own will instead of submitting to his will for our lives? John 7 is a chapter that reveals Jesus' boldness, his divine mission, and his unwavering commitment to the will of the Father. It calls us to consider who he is and how we respond to him. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions or insights, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Next time, we'll take a look at John 8, where Jesus declares himself the light of the world. Until then, may God's will be done in your life, and thanks for watching.